Ford Taurus. Now, looking into the sky, I have to give a few flowers to the big sedan that used to represent American life. You see, the Ford Taurus, back in its heyday, was that girl. Okay, maybe I didn't say that right. But the Ford Taurus represented a lot of things prior to the third generation. It was America's car. It was the face of America, and it represented the big American dream of getting a house, having a family, and hauling them around in either your full-size sedan or your station wagon. Nowadays, that sedan or station wagon has transformed into an SUV, which I think is a bit disgusting, but that's not the point. A Ford Taurus, unlike many other cars, just had a bit of presence in its earlier days. But in the latter portion of his days, it was very much on the bed of do not resuscitate. And Alan Mulally is partly responsible of why we got it back, but also partly why the continuation of that vehicle died as quickly as it did. I don't know if they hated that vehicle, but we're about to find out. What's up, guys? My name is Chris, and welcome to The Breakdown, where we talk about everything cars, news, and reviews. If you're new to the channel, of course, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. I appreciate you. So I had a thought, and I reached out to you guys to do your weekly polls that you guys have so graciously done. And I initially did the Honda Civic because that's what you guys wanted to talk about. But next up on the lineup was the Ford Taurus. Now, you guys may not remember, especially some of you guys who were born after 2000, is that the Ford Taurus is a car that had a great reputation and fell from grace. And in this video, I wanted to talk about the Ford Taurus's legacy, the botch job, the resurgence, and the demise of that Ford Taurus. And you would be surprised at what happened. And at the end of the day, ambition is what killed the Ford Taurus. And what do I mean by that? Well, you're going to have to stick around and find out. So with that being said, stick around and stay tuned because you are now watching The Breakdown. And by the way, if you would like to help and support the channel, feel free to buy me a coffee because I like coffee, as well as there will also be a link for donations in the description below. Anything and everything that you guys offer is always welcome, and I really appreciate your support and your continued support for this channel. Now let's get into the video. So the thing is that the Ford Taurus is a distant memory. We don't remember the Ford Taurus as a community. The only thing we know now is Explorers and Escapes and Broncos, and I wouldn't even say the Focus is remembered because it's remembered elsewhere, just not here in America. And the thing is that the Ford Taurus, when it initially launched, there was momentum. There was presence, baby. The Taurus back in '85, when it debuted, had a huge shock to the automotive world because it was unlike anything the people had seen. Even though it carried a 2.5 liter as a base model and you could upgrade your way into a 3 liter, it was seen as a car that offered so many different practical and functionality. And really what really sold the Taurus, aside from being a big sedan, a big American sedan at that, is that it carried the aerodynamic styling that had not been seen on many other American cars. And we can attribute that to the K cars of the time because the K cars were like copy paste cars, but they helped save Chrysler. And like those K cars, the Ford Taurus also helped save Ford. Now, the legacy goes is that Taurus comes from the name of two executives' wives, and that was their star sign. And I always had wondered that, but it is something to be said about how one particular name can shape the entire legacy of a particular model. I mean, there's, the other names like Malibu, there's Passat, there is Maxima. There's just some names that just stick with people. And the Taurus was one of the first times in a long time, especially after the gas crisis of '73, that Americans had a stake in being reinvigorated to the market. Now, you also could get the SHO model, which would be later introduced, and the Taurus in its first run sold closer to a whopping 2 million cars by the time it was done. And Ford knew that they had a hit on their hands. They said, baby, that record slaps. And so they said, instead of being dynamic, we're going to try to run it again. And that's when we got the refresh. And this might be one of the first times I remember a refresh. And I didn't really understand that there is refreshes and redesigns, evolutionary, revolutionary. I didn't really understand what those terms meant. So this was a really crazy time for Americans to experience a big American sedan. Now, there also was other competitors like the Intrepid, which the Intrepid was very new for Dodge, and the Intrepid style, the cab forward design, plays a huge role in why a lot of the Ford Taurus legacy dies away, but I'll get into that in a minute. So the second generation comes, and the people, they're not overwhelmed. They're not underwhelmed either. And for this generation, I'll say that there was nothing really special about it. It just was a continuation of the first gen. And the 2.5 had been dropped in favor of the V6s, which was the Vulcan, as well as there would later be a Duratec. The second generation did okay, roughly about 1.5 million units. And it only ran for 4 years, unlike the first generation, which ran for 6. And the difference was that the ambition of Ford was steadily losing steam, and at this point it's a 10-year run. So Ford is looking at how can they be ambitious and shoot for the same shot and get the people going like they did the last time. And Ford really wanted to get on the bandwagon of the cab forward design.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And the the third generation was a problem. Not in a great way either. The Ford Taurus for the third generation was ambitious. And this was the first time that we had seen radical design not do its job. And I don't know, as somebody who understands art and really gets into it, that car was hideous. And the first one was lowly named Jelly Bean, but apparently this one was idealized after some slippers, house slippers, if you will. The bulbous headlights, the flip fold interior, there was a lot going on. Even the engineering was crazy because my best friend had one, and I was impressed by the space. And I got to drive it a few times. It was pretty cool. But she had the Vulcan, and I don't think she had the Duratec. Yeah, she had the Vulcan V6, and it was cool. It was a great first time college car. But overall, the design was so controversial that Ford had to go back and do a quick refresh of the grille. They had to go do a quick refresh of the interior. They had to do a quick refresh of a lot of different things. And the Mercury Sable was not much better, but it didn't have the same level of criticism that the Ford Taurus did. And this is also the first time that we witnessed Ford go away from retail sales and go over to fleet sales. The bigger point here is that when you get too ambitious and you get pummeled down by consumer sales, you start to shy away from the legacy that brought you there in the first place. And this generation did not last long. The third generation lasted from 1996 to 1999. And the criticism was absolutely the styling. I had thought about putting out a video about first time impressions because we've seen this before where cars will look a particular way and we end up shying away from it, and the car itself just did not hold up. The Duratec apparently had a lot of issues, and even the engine that was built by Yokohama was plagued with problems and didn't last long. Most of those Ford Tauruses today are in a junkyard. A lot of paint peeling issues, a lot of rust, a lot of different complexities that otherwise could have been fixed. But the bigger point is that this was a botched job because the executives at Ford and the designers at Ford were so ambitious to recreate the 1985 edition of the Taurus that they almost lost the plot. And the fourth generation is more of an overcorrection than a mild correction of what happened, and it became so conservative that generation is almost forgettable and considered to be a rental car. And there wasn't much different. It was more of a emergency overhaul as a comparison to the radical design. And the point that I'm making here is that the third generation is really where we see the downfall of the Ford Taurus, in addition to the popularity decline of sedans. Now, the fourth generation, it had its place. It was okay. It was the definition of mediocre, and we don't want to piss anybody off. And sales from the first and second generation up until the third were very different, and the fourth generation slightly recovered, and it did everything okay, but there was nothing spectacular and or exciting. We also saw the drop of the SHO, which was important to enthusiasts who were considering getting one. The fourth generation just had nothing exciting about it. Now, here's where things got a little murky. So towards the middle of the 2000s, Alan Mulally comes in and he says, "Hey, I like it here. I like everything here. Where's the Taurus?" And the people in the back are like, "What Taurus?" And he's like, "What do you mean what Taurus?"
"We were thinking the Ford 500.
The 5 what? That is how Alan Mulally responded once he stepped foot into Ford. Now, he had came over from Boeing, and he understands of many executives that have come through Ford. He understands what the people wanted. In the mid 2000s up until the 2010s, the renaissance of Ford happened right around that time. And Alan Mulally was the driving force, and part of that was to create the One Ford plan. The Ford Taurus by the third generation had lost its platform as the best-selling car in America, and Alan Mulally wanted to bring that back. He was like, "Hey, y'all need to bring it back." Now, prior to that, there was the Ford 500, and it was more so Volvo derived as a part of their global venture with their premium automotive group, and just taking some things to improve their other brands, including their mainstream brand Ford. But unfortunately, one of the big complaints about the Ford 500 is the name change. Even though it was named after the Galaxy 500, most people did not equate the 500 to the same level of legacy and turnpike that the Taurus had. And what's even crazier is that the Ford 500 came with a regular Aisin transmission, but when you went into the higher grade, you got a CVT. Most people complained that the 500 was just lackluster, and Alan Mulally would bring back the Taurus nameplate for the fifth generation, and the fifth generation upgraded everything, and going from a normal 3-liter to a 3.5 liter, and bringing back the 6-speed automatic transmission. And this was the slight revival of the Ford Taurus, but it didn't have the same punch. And the next generation that was designed by Earl Lucas was the Ford Taurus that we remember last. So this generation was designed off of their kinetic design, and this thing was some of the most amazing lines we had ever seen from a Ford Taurus. And that thing was pretty, it had presence, it was big, and it was ignorant. Even in the rear, which I didn't really care for the twin exhaust. I like the dual exhaust on the refresh. But even then, it gave big, gaudy sedan. And that particular generation was probably the biggest we remember from Detroit for the Ford Taurus. Now, around the same time, we began to see an upheaval in the Explorer, the Escape, the Expedition in some cases, and Lincoln still had their big things. And we also saw the defunct of Mercury. And so the Ford Taurus is almost the last riding piece of big American sedans, as the only thing that really could compete with it was the 300. Now, the Ford Taurus for its long time had a legacy of being the go-to. The Impala could compete, but you still had vehicles like the Avalon, which was slowly taking over. The Maxima was still trying to get there. And even the Honda Accord had been classified a generation around this time, roughly around the 9th generation, was classified as a large full-size sedan. And this was the pinnacle of American luxury. It had leather appointments, push start, sync, and the gear selector that was initially launched before they changed it was just really big, heavy sedan, and it could be offered in front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. And it also came with the EcoBoost if you got the SHO, and it came with several different engines, from the 2-liter turbo to the 3.5 liter, and if it was a police interceptor, it would be a 3.7. And the EcoBoost on this thing is very torquey, very punchy, and for the most part, this car was reliable, and you didn't have too many issues, at least from my understanding. And the Ford Taurus is just a car that I feel like in today's world is something that we are missing. We don't have big sedans. We don't have compact, affordable sedans. If you watch my video about the Honda Civic, I talked about that. And I really miss the Ford Taurus. And I've been looking online, Facebook Marketplace. You can get an amazing deal on these. Now, you might have some problems because this car was discontinued around 2019. And so, you know, this car at this point is roughly about 10, 12 years old in cycle. So it won't be perfect. But overall, the point of this video is that Americans need big sedans again, and we have to begin falling in love with sedans and wagons again. For whatever reason, we want these SUVs. We want to feel very copy paste, and I just feel like sedans are where the character lied. And coupes, we need coupes again, and coupes have died as well. And I feel like that is why a lot of cars feel neutered, and the Ford Taurus was one of the last running examples of what it meant to have a car with power and size and practicality and space. And I really hope that in the next near future, even if we do go electric, we get something that has the same legacy as the Ford Taurus. But now that my recap is over, you guys leave me a comment below and let me know if you've ever driven the Ford Taurus, what you thought about it, and if they should bring it back along with the Fusion and many other cars that have gone to the graveyard, because at this point I'm getting bored with the same stale designs and I miss those cars. And with that being said, until the next video, I will see you guys later.